giving you an overview of the Greek verbs. It's going to be a simple approach. We're going to do a schematic first and try to alleviate some of the anxieties that people have about the Greek verb. Usually people freak out, think that they're too complicated, way too many principal parts, etc. So in this course, I want to make sure that everyone comes away with a sense that Greek verbs are not that complicated. They are actually easy to handle. So, as I'm calling it, a simple approach. Now, I'm going to start with a counterintuitive, which is to begin with the me verbs. Usually textbooks, even the textbooks that I like to use, Master Narde's Introduction to Greek, Added Greek, puts the me verbs later on in the process of acquisition. I like to put the me verbs first, mainly because the me verbs tend to be the most common verbs, and they happen quite frequently, and they're not that difficult to deal with once you get a hang of them and once you realize what's actually going on. So I'm going to begin with the irregular me verbs, and then we'll look at some of the basic 5 regular me verbs that make the pattern for other me verbs, and then we'll go forward. So let's begin with the regular me verbs, the irregular me verbs. All right, so let's begin with the irregular me verbs. These are the 3: aimi, to be, aimi, to go, and faimi, to say. These 3 verbs are going to be important for a lot of things. Well, one of the things that they're really good for is getting you used to me verbs. So, aimi, to be, as in most languages, the verb to be is the most irregular, and so we can't really use it for any kind of pattern. So you just have to memorize it. So aimi, I am, a, you are, st, he, she, it is, esmen, we are, este, you all are, ac, they are. Okay. Now notice the infinitive is ienai. And with me verbs, the infinitive, if you learn the infinitive with the me verb, it's going to be a good sort of trick. But with the verb to be, again, doesn't matter. It's just irregular. You just have to memorize it. Now, when we get to aimi, to go, we're starting to get a bit more regular, a bit more like regular me verbs. So one of the things that distinguishes me verbs is this vowel switch that happens from singular to plural. Me verbs tend to shorten the vowel in the plural. So this is why the infinitive is going to be helpful, because the infinitive gives you the stem of the plural where the vowel is shorter. And because certain vowels, long vowels, can be created from different combinations of vowels, it might be tricky if you don't realize what's happening. But okay, let's look at aimi, to go. So aimi, to go, I go, aimi, you go, a, he, she, it goes, ac. In the plural, imen, we go, ite, you all go, iac, they go. Now notice we went from a diphthong, a, to just the iota, e. And the infinitive actually tells us that, because the e is the indicator of the stem that you'll have in the plural, the stem vowel you'll have in the plural. It's even clearer with faimi. So you start off faimi, face, facey, famen, fate, fasi. Fanai was the infinitive, and so the plural you have famen, fate, fasi. Now faimi is also great because it actually gives us the endings of the regular endings of the me verbs. Me, s, si, men, te, asi. Now, probably Femi is in this irregular group because, of course, it's an enclitic. And you can tell it's an enclitic because it's accentuated in the same way that Amy is accentuated on the ultima. And you remember, verbs usually do not get accents on the ultima. Verb accents tend to be recessive, going all the way back as far as they can. And so Amy to go, it has a regular accentuation. The circumflex, because it's a long short, remember you'll have a circumflex on the penult if the ultima is short and the penult is long. Okay, so now we've got our irregular me verbs, and we've gone from completely irregular to somewhat regular to kind of regular with Femi. And you'll see Femi actually is the appropriate vowel, has the appropriate endings. So let's look at that. So here we can see the endings of the me verbs are me, s, si, men, te, asi. And we'll remember that it was Femi, face, facey, famen, fate, fasi. Right? So the endings of Femi are the endings of the me verbs. Now, I put them here to compare with the endings for the omega verbs, which you guys are already familiar with. And you'll see that, okay, well, omega is what is making it an omega verb. But notice it's ace, which is, lo and behold, sigma. A, which I'll prove to you is actually the same as C. Men, for omen, te, ete, and asi, usi. Again, the vowel is omega, so we're going to expect a omega here. All right, well, then let's look at these deponent endings, what I call the my verbs. My, a, etai, amatha, estha, ontai. And we're going to see that these are going to be the same regardless of whether it's a me verb or an omega verb. But let's move forward. All right, so our first regular, completely well-behaved me verb is histami. It has all its parts. It's the perfect me verb. Okay. Now, you'll notice then that if we memorize histami, in addition to its principal parts, but histami and its infinitive, histanai, we will be able to conjugate it in the present. Because we now know that the shift in the vowel goes from eta to alpha, right? So histami, histes, histasi, and then in the plural, histanai is our infinitive, so we know it's histamen, histate, histasi. Okay. Now, histami can be tricky, but if you remember that in the active, it means to make X stand, to make someone or something stand. You shouldn't have a problem. All right. Now let's look at tithami. So again, we got tithami. It's infinitive, tithenai. So we know that shift now is going to go from eta to epsilon. We already saw with histami that eta can also go to alpha. Well, here we're seeing it go from eta to epsilon. So tithami, tithes, tithesi, tithamen, tithate, titheasi. And notice that with tithami, the epsilon alpha is not coalescing. They're going to be separate vowels here. Now, what about he-ami, to send or to shoot? Well, again, the infinitive is hienai. So this tells us that we're going to get an epsilon for the most part here. So when the vowel shift happens. So he, a, me, he, ace, he, a, c, and then the vowel shift happens. It's he, men, he, te, and then we get hiasi. However, this circumflex tells us that in this case, the vowels did coalesce. This is a contraction because epsilon would take the accent, as you can see here, but when they coalesce, then you get a circumflex and on the alpha. So it's the same setup. You just have to memorize that. He, me, he, ace, he, ac, he, men, he, te, hiasi. All right, what about an omega me verb, didomi, to give? You can see how these principal paradigm me verbs are worth learning early because they're ridiculously common. So didomi and the infinitive didonai. So that gives you the shift. So didomi, didos, didosi, didomen, didote, didoasi. All right. Another paradigm is the upsilon me verbs. So deknumi. All right, and well, the deknunai is our infinitive, and so that tells us just the vowel upsilon becomes shorter. So at least that's useful. So here they're just marked to tell you that it's long in the singular and short in the plural. So deknumi, deknus, deknusi, deknumen, deknute, deknuasi. Okay. Now, let's think a little bit about the omega verbs in relation to the me verbs, right? So we remember that, okay, we're going to get rid of we'll get our stem by getting rid of our ending, and then we have our verb. So pawo, pawes, pawe, pawomen, pawete, pawusi, and the infinitive is pawain. All right. Now let's look at how they compare much more closely with a little bit more linguistics involved here. All right, so our omega verbs, okay, first person is what indicates that it's an omega verb, so omega. Me verbs, me. Now, second person is ace in the omega verbs, so there's that sigma, and it's sigma here. Because remember, the omega verbs have this gluing vowel, whereas the me verbs just stick it right onto the stem. All right, now the third person. Remember I told you, I proved to you that the A in the omega verbs is actually the same ending as the C in the me verbs. Well, it turns out, yeah, it is. Because when you have, what it really should be, was in an earlier stage of the language, was SC, right? SC. And normally in this kind of combination, the sigma falls out, and what are you left with? Epsilon iota. So A is actually C. And let's go to the plural. So again, omen, men, ete, te, usi, asi. Okay, so the endings are really the same. Now, in the middle, let's see what happens. So it's omai, my. Now, in the omega verbs, it's a, si. Well, again, because the me verbs, it's psi. My, psi, tai, methus, the, entai. That's the me verbs. Well, the psi, again, epsilon in front of that sigma is going to drop out, and you're going to get epsilon, alpha, iota. And when we look at our vowel coalescings, which you'll look at in a minute, you'll see that eta or a this A here or eta with the iota subscript is what happens, because you're getting this combination of vowels, epsilon, alpha, iota, which will produce A. All right, and which is, so it's the same as psi. Etai, tai, ometa, meta, esthe, sthe, ontai, ntai. Okay. And so then you have their active infinitive is in the omega verbs, nai in the me verbs. Middle, it's esthai and sthai. So the endings in it's easy to spot a middle passive infinitive because of that sthai ending. All right. Okay. Now, contract verbs. So Lushnik waits, I guess, till God comes back before she introduces you guys to the contract verbs. Well, I like to introduce the contract verbs right away as well. Like after we learn I like to introduce them with the omega verbs, because honestly, they are omega verbs and there's nothing particularly weird about them. Now, what makes them tricky is that they do come with vowels coalescing with one another. Now, I've been alluding to the fact that vowels, when they coalesce, they can produce other vowels. So Mastronardi actually helps out here because he gives you a guide to contractions in his book on page 385. And so it's worth just learning them and memorizing them. So I'm just going to go over them quickly so you can see some of the patterns that are there. All right. The way to think about alphas is that they're very strong vowels. So in most combinations, the alpha is going to be retained. When an alpha is involved with another vowel, in other words, the alpha is going to show up. So here we have, of course, with alphas plus alphas are going to produce long alphas. Alpha plus iota is going to produce a diphthong I, or the diphthong with the iota subscript. Alpha plus epsilon is going to produce a long alpha again. Alpha plus epsilon iota is going to produce alpha with the iota, alpha subscript, or alpha plus eta will give you alpha subscript. And all these alphas are long here, because diphthongs are always long, and these ones are marked to tell you that they're long. So basically alpha plus another vowel, alpha plus iota, alpha plus epsilon, alpha plus eta, alpha plus eta, epsilon iota or eta iota, are all going to produce a long alpha. And if the iota is involved, it'll either be adscript here or subscript. Alpha plus Omicron is going to generate omega. However that Omicron, whether that's Omicron Epsilon or Omicron or omega, alpha plus Omicron Epsilon or omega is going to produce omega, because omega is the dominant vowel. Alpha plus Omicron iota is going to produce omega, but with the iota subscript. All right. Now, epsilons are a little bit trickier, because we already seen that epsilon plus alpha can produce alpha when it's in this combination with alpha. Epsilon can produce alpha. However, epsilon with its lead verb plus alpha can produce eta. Right? Epsilon plus alpha iota, or epsilon plus eta, will produce eta iota subscript. Alpha plus epsilon gives you epsilon iota. Epsilon plus epsilon iota also gives you epsilon iota. Epsilon plus iota gives you epsilon iota. And epsilon iota is epsilon iota. So these are all Attic contractions. And in Attic dialect, this is what we'll get. Now, epsilon plus Omicron gives you oo. Epsilon plus Omicron upsilon gives you oi. Epsilon plus upsilon oo. Epsilon plus omega omega. Epsilon plus omega iota subscript omega iota subscript. All right, now we have eta plus iota gives you eta iota subscript. Any eta here combination with iota is going to give you iota subscript. Eta plus eta or eta plus epsilon, and sometimes eta plus iota, epsilon, iota all produce an eta without the subscript. And eta plus omicron iota gives you omega with the iota subscript. All right, and then we have omicrons. Well, omicrons plus anything are either going to give you oo, so epsilon, omicron, epsilon. We've already saw epsilon, omicron, oo, omicron, epsilon, oo. And here, we're just going to get oos here. Then omicron also more generally gives you oi. Epsilon, omicron plus omicron oi gives you oi. Omicron plus eta iota subscript gives you oi. But then omicron plus eta or omicron plus omega gives you omega. Omicron plus omega iota gives you omega iota subscript. So this is a very important chart or formula system for you to memorize. It's not that difficult. If you just spend about an hour just going through it, you'll start to realize, wait a second, it's not that difficult. But it's important to have because the coalescing of vowels is really crucial in Attic, the Attic dialect, the one we're learning. And it's also good to know how these combinations are formed. All right, now let's look at our contract omega verbs. And there are three types. There's the alpha contract, epsilon contract, and Omicron contract. So we'll start with our alpha contract, and our example will be horao, to see. So we'll get our stem, get rid of our omega in that first principal part. That leaves us with hora, which is our stem. All right, and then we're just going to put on our personal endings. So we end up with horao, horaes, horae, horaomen, horaete, horausi, horain as the infinitive. All right, so now we contract. Now in Attic, this is where the contraction kicks in. In other dialects, there isn't a contraction, so it's really good to know what was the underlying vowel combination, because when we move to, say, Herodotus or Homer or Doric poets, we'll see that the vowels matter and that they're different because we can see them. If you only know the Attic, you won't know that, and don't remember how you got to it. It'll be a problem. So this is always going to be correct as far as I'm concerned. However, you should learn how to contract for Attic. All right, so we saw that alpha plus omega gives us omega with the circumflex, because so the rule for accenting contract vowels is that when they are, if you're going to contract them, if the first vowel in the combination has the accent, then it takes a circumflex. So since alpha has the accent, we're going to get circumflexes. All right, so alpha plus omega gives you omega. Alpha plus epsilon iota gives you alpha with the iota subscript. Alpha plus epsilon, same thing. Alpha plus epsilon iota gives you alpha epsilon subscript. Alpha plus omicron gives you omega again. Alpha plus epsilon gives you alpha. Alpha plus omega upsilon gives you omega. Alpha plus epsilon iota gives you alpha. And sometimes there is a subscript iota there. Okay. Now, epsilon contract, we're going to use poieo, and again, we're going to get rid of our omega, and then that leaves us with our stem, and then we're going to put our endings on. So, o, poieo, poies, poie, poio, et omen, poi, et ete, poi, et usi, poi, et in. Right? And then we contract them in Attic, and we get poio, because epsilon omicron, so epsilon omega gives you omega. Poies, because this combination gives you a with the lengthening. Same thing here. Epsilon omicron here gives you u, so it's poiumen. Epsilon gives you poiete. Epsilon omicron upsilon gives you u again, so poiusi. And then the infinitive poiein becomes poiein. Okay. Now the final contract is the Omicron contract, and our example is de lao, to make clear, to make something appear or to show something. So de lao, and here we have de lao, de laes, de lae, de lao omen, de laete, de lausi, de lain. And so the contracts, then we get omicron plus omega, of course, is omega. Omicron plus epsilon iota gives you ois. Same thing here, oi. So ois, oi. And then omicron plus omicron gives you u. So de lumen. Omicron plus epsilon again gives you u. So ute. Omicron plus omicron upsilon gives you u. So usi. And omicron plus epsilon iota gives you un again. Okay. So that takes care of our contracts. Now we want to look at the middle passive, the my verbs. Okay. So again, what we're getting is, remember, you have your stem from like pawo, right? We have our stem, and then we're gonna have our gluing vowel with our endings that we've noticed, remember, were like the endings from the me verbs, right? So pawomai, pawe, and remember we looked at that, right? That e plus psi is gonna give us a. So pawe or pawe, pau e tai, pau o metha, pau este, pau ontai, pau estai. Okay, so these are how the my verbs, which are usually middle passive, primary endings, look. Now, my verbs are also the forms of deponents. So deponent verbs look like they're middle passive, but they're actually active. And so a lot of very common verbs fall into this category. So bulamai, which means I want, I wish, I desire, I intend. So bulamai in the future is bulesomai. So both the present and the future are deponent here. Bulamai, bulesomai. Gignamai, I'm born. A little baby here is born. Genesamai, I will be born. Both of them, again, are deponents. And erchamai, I go, another to go. Elusamai, I will go. Again, both of these are deponents. Now, it's not necessarily the case that just because the first principal part is a deponent, the second principal part will be a deponent. This is not a guarantee. Nor is it a guarantee that if the first principal part is just a regular active omega or me, that the future or whatever other principal parts will also be active. They could also be deponent. So we'll see that in a second. But let's look at the difference. Let's look at the active voice, middle passive, active. And so in the active, we know that, well, the subject is doing the verb, and usually the verb can have an object. So here you have paweton ipon. He is stopping the horse, right? So the man is stopping the horse. Paweton hipon. In the middle, there are two options here, depending on who you make the subject, right? So pawetai ton hipon. He, the man, is stopping the horse. Same translation, only that does it imply that he's doing it for his own sake. Maybe he wants to win the rodeo. Now, another way you can do it if you make the horse the subject, ho hippos uk pawetai automatos. So here is the horse doesn't stop itself automatically, or doesn't stop by itself. The man is making it stop. So all this is describing the same action, right? Ho hippos uk pawetai automatos. Right? The horse doesn't stop by itself, or is not stopping by itself, because what? Pawetai ton hippon aner. The man is stopping the horse. All right. So ho hippos pawetai hupo autu. The horse is stopped, or is being stopped by him, the man, right? So again, here's the passive. So in the active, you are stopping something. In the middle, you can be stopping something for your own benefit, or you can be stopping yourself. And in the passive, you are being stopped by some other outside agent. Okay? So here's a couple of examples using different verbs. The verb ago means to lead. So here we have, in the first one, we have ho aner to brephos age. So the man leads the baby, right? Ho aner to brephos age. To brephos agetai hupo tu andros. So the baby is being led by the man. So both of them are describing what is happening in the GIF. It's just a matter of perspective. Likewise here, he ailuros ageto kuon. So ailuros, the cat, leads the dog. He ailuros ageto kuon. Or to kuon hupotes ailuros agetai. The dog is being led by the cat. To kuon hupotes ailuru agetai. The dog is being led by the cat. Both of them are the same action, same thing happening, only it's a matter of perspective whether it's going to be active or passive. All right, so let's have a little bit of a discussion about principal parts, because as we're going to move out of the present system into the aorist. So it's good to notice that the principal parts, and especially since I'm going to, in relation to my simplified approach, I'm going to actually just destroy our traditional way in which principal parts are treated. So here, the new fourth principal part is the old sixth principal part, and it'll make sense why I'm moving it here in a second. So our first principal part is the present active first person, pawo. And then the second principal part is the future, pao so. It's worth doing them together because the endings are identical. It's just the stem that tells you that it's future. Present stem is pao, the future is paus. Now, the third principal part and the fourth principal part bring us into the next system. So we have the first system is the present system, second system is the future system, the third system is the aorist system. So it makes no sense to keep the aorist passive after we do the perfect system. So it's better to just do it here. So what you have then is e pausa is the first principal part, or it's the first person singular of the aorist active. And it's, so you're going to get rid of this ending to give us our stem for the aorist, which is epaus. You're going to put the endings on. But it's also the stem for the active and the middle the middle. Now, so the difference between when we move from the into the aorist, we find out that the aorist has a separate active or separate passive from the middle. Likewise in the future as well. The future also has a separate passive from the middle. Only in the present and the perfect do you have the middle passive be the same form. In the future and in the aorist, the middle passive, the middle and the passive are separated into their own forms. So it makes sense then to bring them in here. So epauso, epausa, that's going to give us our present aorist active and our aorist middle, right? So we can see we're going to have a middle ending set up coming off of this form. And then when we get to the passive, this will be our stem, epauthane. So thane is the thane will be our ending here. Just going to erase that. Yeah. So we'll see that is the passive. So it makes sense to learn the aorist all together, whether the present, the active, the middle, and the passive all at the same time before moving on to dealing with the perfect or something like that. So that's what when we learn the aorist, we're going to do that. All right, so that deals with our principal parts. So let's look at some back to the my verbs, right? Let's look at some deponents. So here we have gignomai, I am born, and you have its future genesomai. So again, you're just going to get rid of your personal ending and you're going to put on the appropriate ones. So whether you're dealing with gignomai or genesomai, the endings are identical, right? It's the stem that tells you whether you are present or future. And this is why we have to learn our principal parts. Baby says, gignomai. Brephos gignetai. The baby is born. All right, here's a mother. And she says, T gignetai, what's happening? Or what's being born? Brephos ginesetai, the baby will be born. Okay, here's a verb that you will learn again. If you haven't learned it already, we'll certainly learn it when we do our first reading Greek passage, which is akouo. Get acoustics from that. I hear akouo. But notice, first principal part, akouo, it's a regular active form, but the future is a deponent. So acousomai. So there's no acouso. There's just the deponent, acousomai. So that's a case of we have two different forms for the different stems. He gune akue, the woman hears. Akouo, akouo, I hear. All right, so then you have erkomai, another deponent meaning I go, right? So erkomai, elusomai, we already saw that as the I go and I will go, but also Amy, to go, the me verb, also means I will go. So it has a future meaning. Now there's another verb to go, usually meaning to walk. You have to be on feet, stepping. Bino, and again, it's going to show up in our reading Greek as one of our first verbs. Bino, I walk, I go on foot, right? And so its future is besomai. So bino, besomai. So again, another one where in the present system it's active form, but when you move to the future, it's a deponent. Bino, besomai. So zoan erketai, the animal is going. Bino diatenturan, I'm stepping through the door. Blepo, another verb to see, which again we'll also see in our reading Greek. Blepo, I see, and horao, I see. They're both meaning to see, and they're both actually related to the eye, because the blepo part relates to the eyelids, your eyelids, and horao is the word for the eye. So I'm eyeing you is one way of thinking about to see. So notice though, horao is a contract, alpha contract, horao, but its future is opsomai, a deponent. Blepo is a regular omega verb, but its future is blepsomai, a deponent. All right, so ho androse hora e or hora. The man sees you. Arakaisu ton andron hores or horas. Do you see the man too? Balo is to throw, another verb meaning like hiemi, but this is balo, throw, and baleo, its future is an epsilon contract, right? So it's a regular omega verb in the present, but then it's a epsilon contract in the future. And we'll see when we look at some patterns. Master already has a list of patterns in the back of his book, that when it's a double lambda or double lambda, the tendency is that the future will be epsilon contract. So ho'aner baletas sphiras epiton kuon. That's what's happening here. Ho'aner, the man, is throwing tas sphiras, spheres. We get a word from that, sphiras, spheres, the balls. Epiton kuon, at the dog. Ho'aner baletas sphiras epiton kuon. The man will throw the balls at the dog. So here how we conjugate ballet. Ballet o balais ballet, ballet omen balete balusi. So what would be the ending if we were to contract them, right? We would get omega, we would get e, the circumflex, is, we would get a, the circumflex, we would get oo, oomen, we would get eta, and then we'd get oozy. Okay. All right. So I hope this was helpful to get us started off and sort of refreshing your memory, maybe giving you a little bit new information on contract vowels and me verbs, contract verbs and me verbs, and we'll pick this up when we start our class. And I hope you all are looking forward to getting going in our class. And so have a great afternoon, and we'll see you in class.